The envelope sat on the kitchen table for 2 days before I touched it. I remember staring at it every morning while I poured my coffee, telling myself I was being paranoid. Telling myself that good husbands don't secretly order paternity tests. Good husbands trust their wives. But something in me had stopped trusting a long time ago. I just hadn't admitted it yet. My name doesn't matter. What matters is what happened in my kitchen on a Tuesday morning in March, when I finally opened that envelope with my hands shaking so bad I ripped the paper instead of sliding it open. One line. That's all I needed to read. Probability of paternity, 0%. I sat down on the floor. Right there, in the middle of my kitchen, like my legs just gave out from under me. My daughter's photo was still on the fridge behind me. 6 months old. Sleeping in that little yellow onesie my mother bought her. Not mine. I want to tell you how I got there. Because 6 months before that morning, I was the happiest man in my neighborhood. I want you to understand what it feels like to build an entire life on something that was never real, and then watch it collapse in the span of reading one sentence on a piece of paper. My wife's name is Rachel. We met at a mutual friend's wedding almost 6 years ago, and I fell for her before the reception even started. She had this laugh that made everyone around her laugh too, even if they didn't hear the joke. She worked as a dental hygienist. I worked in logistics for a shipping company. Nothing glamorous. Nothing that made for an exciting story. Just two ordinary people who found each other and built something that felt, for a long time, unshakable. We got married 3 years in. Small ceremony. Her sister cried through the whole thing. My father gave a toast that went on way too long, and everybody laughed about it for years afterward. I remember standing at the altar watching her walk toward me, thinking, this is it, this is the person I'm going to grow old with. I believed that with my whole chest. I never once questioned it. When Rachel told me she was pregnant, I cried in the bathroom so she wouldn't see me. I'd wanted to be a father since I was a kid myself, watching my own dad coach Little League on weekends, thinking, someday, that's going to be me. I remember calling my mother that same night and not being able to get the words out for almost a full minute because I was choked up. The pregnancy wasn't easy. She had morning sickness that lasted into her second trimester. She was exhausted all the time. I picked up extra shifts to cover the medical bills, came home late most nights, and told myself it was worth it. Every bit of it. Because we were building something. I painted the nursery yellow because we didn't want to know the gender ahead of time. I remember standing in that room at 2 a.m, rolling paint onto the wall, imagining what our life was going to look like in a year. 2 years. 10. I pictured birthday parties in the backyard. I pictured teaching this kid how to ride a bike in the driveway. I had the whole future mapped out in my head before she was even born. Our daughter came into the world on a Thursday in September. I held her before Rachel even had a chance to. The nurse placed her in my arms, and I swear, something in my chest just cracked open. I'd never felt anything like it. Not before. Not since. We named her Emily. For the first few months, everything felt exactly the way I'd imagined it. Sleepless nights, sure. Arguments about whose turn it was to change a diaper at 3 a.m. But underneath all of it, there was this steady, quiet joy. I used to sit in the nursery some nights just watching her breathe, thinking I was the luckiest man alive. Then, slowly, things started to feel different. It's hard to explain what I mean by that. Nothing dramatic happened. No big fight. No confession. Just small things. Little cracks in the wall that I noticed but didn't want to look at too closely. Rachel started taking her phone into the bathroom with her. She'd never done that before. She'd leave the room to take calls that used to happen in front of me without a second thought. She started working later at the dental office, which struck me as strange, because hygienists don't usually have overtime the way she was describing it. One night I asked her about it, casually, while we were doing dishes. "You've been staying late a lot," I said. Not accusing. Just noticing out loud. She didn't look up from the sink. Dr. Halloran's been slammed. We're short-staffed. I let it go. That's the thing about love, you want so badly to believe the person in front of you that you'll accept almost any explanation, even the flimsy ones, just so you don't have to face what your gut is already telling you. Around that same time, my mother started saying little things too, things I brushed off at the time but that stuck with me later. She'd hold Emily at Sunday dinner and say, "She's got somebody's eyes, that's for sure, just not sure whose." I laughed it off. Everyone laughed it off. Babies look like nobody for the first year, that's just how it goes, people said. But there was one thing I couldn't explain away so easily. Emily didn't look like me. Not even a little. I have dark brown eyes. Rachel has hazel. Emily's eyes were this pale, almost silvery blue, and everyone kept saying, "Oh, that'll probably change as she gets older, baby's eyes change all the time." I told myself that too. 4 months. But it wasn't just the eyes. It was her hair, coming in a shade of red that neither Rachel nor I have anywhere in our families. Not my side. Not hers, as far as I knew. It was the shape of her nose, narrow and slightly upturned, nothing like the wide, flat bridge that runs through every photo of my father and my grandfather. It was this nagging, quiet feeling every time I looked at her, a feeling I hated myself for having, because what kind of father questions whether his own daughter is his? I brought it up to my mother once, carefully, like I was testing the words out loud for the first time. "Mom, do you think Emily looks like me at all?" She paused a little too long before answering. "Babies change so much in the first year, honey. Don't read into it." But she didn't look me in the eye when she said it. And mothers, I've learned, know how to lie gently to protect their children from things they're not ready to hear. The thought sat in the back of my mind for weeks, growing heavier every day, until one afternoon something happened that made it impossible to ignore any longer. We were at a 4th of July barbecue at Rachel's sister's house. Her whole family was there, aunts, uncles, cousins, passing Emily around like she was the guest of honor, which she basically was. At some point, Rachel's Uncle Pete, a big guy with a booming laugh who'd clearly had one too many beers, held Emily up in the air and said, loud enough for half the yard to hear, "Would you look at that red hair? Somebody's been keeping secrets." He meant it as a joke. Everyone laughed, the way people laugh at something uncomfortable to make it less uncomfortable. Rachel laughed too, but it came out just a half second too late, just a little too high-pitched. I noticed it. I don't think anyone else did. But I noticed. That night, driving home, I asked her straight out. "Does anybody in your family have red hair? Like, anywhere back in the line?" She was quiet for a second too long before she answered. "My great-grandmother, maybe. I don't really know." "Why does it matter?" "It doesn't," I said. But it did. It mattered more than I was willing to admit out loud that night. I sat with that feeling for another 2 weeks before I finally said it out loud to another human being. I was at my buddy Marcus's place, helping him fix his truck, when I finally worked up the nerve. "Do you think it's crazy if I get a paternity test?" Marcus didn't even look up from the engine. "Man, if it's eating you up like that, you already know the answer." "But if I'm wrong, and Rachel finds out I doubted her?" "If you're wrong," he said, wiping his hands on a rag, "then you find out you're wrong, and you never have to think about it again. But if you're right..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "What would you do?" I asked him. He shrugged, but his eyes had gone serious. "I'd rather know the truth and hate myself for a week than not know it and hate myself for the rest of my life." That stuck with me the whole drive home. I ordered the test online. One of those at-home kits where you swab the inside of your cheek and your child's, and mail it off to a lab. I told Rachel it was for a work thing, something about hospital paperwork for Emily's daycare enrollment. She barely looked up from her phone when I asked to swab Emily's cheek while she was watching cartoons on the living room floor. That should have told me something too. How easily she believed the lie. How little she questioned it. The 2 weeks waiting for those results were some of the strangest of my life. I went to work every day, sat through meetings, made small talk with coworkers, and the entire time there was this low hum underneath everything, like a radio playing in another room that I couldn't quite turn off. I'd come home and watch Rachel feed Emily in her high chair, laughing at the way she smeared avocado all over her face, and I'd think, in 3 days I might know something that changes all of this forever. And then I'd push the thought down and just try to be present. Try to enjoy what might be the last few days of not knowing. Then the results came. 0%. I sat on that kitchen floor for what felt like hours, though it was probably only 20 minutes. I remember hearing Emily start to cry from her crib upstairs, and some instinct in me, some part that refused to stop being her father even in that moment, got up and went to comfort her. I held her against my chest, and she stopped crying almost instantly, the way she always did when I picked her up. And I thought, does it even matter? She's still my daughter. I've fed her. I've rocked her to sleep at 3 in the morning. I've memorized the sound of her breathing. But another part of me, a colder, angrier part, was already asking a different question. Who is her father? I didn't confront Rachel that night. I couldn't. I needed time to figure out how to even begin that conversation without either screaming or falling apart completely. So I did something I'm not proud of. I started watching her. Not in some obsessive, dramatic way, just paying attention, really paying attention, for the first time in months. I noticed she'd started wearing a necklace I didn't recognize. Small, silver, nothing flashy, but definitely not something I'd bought her. I noticed she'd changed the passcode on her phone sometime in the last year without telling me. I noticed that whenever the name Derek came up, the office manager at her dental practice, her voice changed slightly. Got lighter. Quicker. Derek. I'd met him twice at office holiday parties. Tall guy, always seemed a little too comfortable putting his hand on people's shoulders when he talked to them, including mine. I started paying closer attention to her schedule too. She told me she was working until 7 most nights that week, covering for a coworker on maternity leave. I called the office directly on a Wednesday afternoon, telling the receptionist I was trying to coordinate a surprise for Rachel's birthday and needed to know what time she'd be leaving. The receptionist paused and said, "Oh, she left around 4 today, actually." Same as usual. My stomach dropped straight through the floor. I want to be honest with you about something. Part of me didn't want to know for certain. Part of me wanted to keep living in that fog, because as long as I didn't have proof, I still had a wife, and I still had a daughter, and my whole life was still standing, even if it was standing on something cracked. But you can't unknow something once you know it. And the not knowing was its own kind of torture. So one Friday night, after Rachel had put Emily down and gone to take a shower, I picked up her phone. She'd left it charging on the kitchen counter, and for the first time in 3 years of marriage, I typed in a guess for her passcode, Emily's birthday, and it worked on the second try. What I found wasn't just an affair. It was worse than that. There were messages going back almost 2 years. Long before Emily was even born. Messages with Derek that started as flirtation and became something else entirely by the time Rachel got pregnant. There were messages from around the exact window of conception, references to a hotel near the office, an apology from Derek about being careful, a reply from Rachel that made my stomach turn, "It doesn't matter, he'll never ask. He'll never ask." She'd banked on my trust. She'd used the fact that I loved her too much to question her as a shield. I kept scrolling, and it got worse. There was a message from Rachel, sent the week she found out she was pregnant, that read, "I did the math. There's a chance. I'm scared." Derek's reply came 4 minutes later, "Don't panic. Odds are still in his favor. Let's just see what happens. Let's just see what happens." Like Emily's entire identity was a coin flip they were content to leave to chance, as long as it didn't disrupt either of their lives. I put the phone down and sat at the kitchen table until she came out of the shower. When she walked into the room and saw my face, she knew. I didn't have to say a word. Some part of her had probably been waiting for this moment for over a year, dreading it, maybe even relieved that it was finally here. "How long?" I said. My voice didn't even sound like mine. She sat down across from me, her hair still wet, wrapped in her robe, and for a long moment she said nothing at all. "How long, Rachel?" "It started before I got pregnant," she said quietly. "It was supposed to be nothing. A mistake. One time. The messages say otherwise." Her face went pale. She realized then that I'd seen everything, not just guessed at pieces. "I did the math," she whispered. "After I found out I was pregnant, I did the math, and I knew there was a chance." "But you were so happy. You were already painting the nursery." "I couldn't tell me the truth," I said. "So instead you let me hold her in that hospital room. You let me cry over a daughter that might not even be mine, and you said nothing." "She's still yours," Rachel said, her voice cracking. "In every way that matters, she's yours." "Don't," I said. "Don't you dare tell me what matters. You took that choice away from me the day you decided to stay quiet." I want to pause here and tell you something, because I think it's important. In that moment, sitting across from the woman I'd built my entire adult life around, I wasn't just angry about the affair. Affairs, as much as they destroy you, are at least a betrayal you can eventually name and grieve and move past, one way or another. What broke me wasn't the affair itself. It was the 18 months of silence that came after it. Every night she climbed into bed next to me, knowing. Every time she watched me hold Emily and call her my little girl, knowing. Every ultrasound appointment. Every 3 a.m. feeding. Every single moment I believed I was building a family, she was standing next to me, letting me believe a lie because the truth was inconvenient. That's the part that still wakes me up some nights. Rachel begged me not to leave. She told me Derek meant nothing, that it had ended almost a year ago, that she'd been trying to bury the mistake and move forward as if it never happened. She said she loved me. She said the marriage, the real one, the one with Emily and the mortgage and the Sunday morning pancakes, that was the true story, and the affair was just a chapter she wished she could tear out. "You don't get to decide which parts were real," I told her. "I don't get to pick and choose which memories to keep either. It's all real now. All of it." I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat in Emily's nursery in the dark, watching her chest rise and fall in her crib, and I asked myself the only question that actually mattered. Did it matter whose blood was in her veins? Because here's the truth nobody tells you about fatherhood. It's not built in a delivery room. It's built at 2 in the morning when you're the only one awake with a screaming infant and you don't quit, even when you want to. It's built in 1,000 small, invisible moments that no DNA test can measure. But I also knew something else. I knew that loving Emily and forgiving Rachel were two completely separate questions, and I couldn't let my love for a 6-month-old baby trap me into staying in a marriage built on a lie I didn't choose. The next morning, I packed a bag. Rachel stood in the doorway of our bedroom, holding Emily, both of them crying, and for a second I almost put the bag down. I almost told her we'd figure it out. But then I thought about that message. Let's just see what happens. And I kept packing. The next few weeks were the hardest of my life. I moved into my brother's spare bedroom, telling my parents only that Rachel and I were working through something, because I couldn't bring myself to say the words out loud yet. Every night I'd drive over to see Emily, sit with her in that nursery, feed her, rock her, and every single time, leaving felt like tearing something out of my own chest. My brother, Chris, didn't ask a lot of questions those first few nights, which I was grateful for. He'd just hand me a beer and sit with me on the back porch while I stared at nothing. One night, though, he finally asked, "You gonna tell me what's actually going on, or are we just gonna keep pretending you're here for the fishing?" So I told him. All of it. He was quiet for a long time after I finished, just turning his bottle around in his hands. Then he said, "You know I love you, man, but I gotta ask. Are you sure about leaving? Because that little girl doesn't care whose DNA she's got. She cares who shows up." "I know," I said. "That's exactly why I'm not disappearing on her. I'm just done pretending Rachel and I are okay." Word got around to my parents eventually, the way these things always do. My mother called me crying, not because she was angry at me, but because she said she'd suspected something wasn't right for months and hadn't known how to say it without sounding cruel. My father, a man of very few words, just said, "You did the right thing finding out. Whatever happens next, at least you're not living a lie anymore." That meant more to me than he probably realized. Rachel tried everything to win me back. Therapy sessions, letters, showing up at my brother's house unannounced with Emily in her car seat, saying she just wanted me to see her, to remember what we were fighting for. She sent long texts apologizing, promising she'd spend the rest of her life making it up to me if I'd just give her the chance. Some nights those messages almost worked on me. Grief is strange that way. It makes you miss things you know you shouldn't want back. And I'll admit, there were nights I almost gave in. Nights I told myself that maybe forgiveness was possible, that maybe I could learn to live with what she'd done if it meant keeping my daughter in my daily life without a custody battle standing between us. Then came the twist I never saw coming. Derek showed up at my brother's house one evening, uninvited, looking like a man who hadn't slept in days. My brother almost didn't let him in, but I told him it was fine. Part of me had been waiting for this conversation without even realizing it. Derek sat across from me at the kitchen table, refusing to make eye contact for the first few minutes. "I need to tell you something," he finally said. "Rachel doesn't know I'm here." "I'm listening." "I've known about the paternity odds since before Emily was born," he said. "Rachel told me she thought it could be mine. I told her to get a test done quietly before the birth. She refused. She said if it came back mine, it would destroy everything she'd built with you, and she wasn't ready to lose that." I felt something cold settle into my chest. "So you both decided to gamble with my life." "I wanted to tell you 100 times," he said. "I have a wife too. A little boy, almost 3. I didn't want to blow up 2 families over something we both knew was a mistake. I told myself staying quiet was protecting everyone." "It wasn't protecting me," I said. "It was protecting both of you." He didn't argue with that. He just sat there, looking smaller than I'd ever seen a grown man look. "Does your wife know?" I asked him. He shook his head. "Not yet. I don't know how to tell her. I don't know if our marriage survives this either." For a second, sitting across from him, I almost felt something like sympathy. Almost. 2 men, sitting in a kitchen that wasn't either of ours, both of our lives quietly detonating because of decisions made behind our backs. Then he said something that changed everything again. "I want to be part of Emily's life. If she's mine, I have a right to know her. I have a right to be her father too." I stared at him for a long moment, and something in me went very, very still. "You don't get to decide that," I said quietly. "Not after 18 months of silence. Not after letting me believe a lie every single day." "She's my blood," he said. "She's my daughter," I said back, and for the first time since I read that lab result, I meant it with my whole chest, no hesitation at all. He left without saying much else. I sat at that table for another hour after he was gone, turning his words over in my head. "He's my blood." I kept hearing it, again and again, like it was trying to convince me of something I already knew wasn't true, not in the way that actually counted. That conversation was the turning point for me. Because up until then, some small part of me had been treating this like a math problem, whose blood, whose rights, whose claim was stronger. But watching Derek sit at that table, trying to calculate his way into a little girl's life 18 months after choosing silence, made something click into place. Fatherhood was never about the test result. It never had been. The test told me a biological fact. It didn't tell me who woke up every single night when Emily had an ear infection. It didn't tell me who learned to fall back asleep standing up, swaying gently, because that was the only thing that calmed her down. It didn't tell me whose voice she recognized the instant I walked into a room. I filed for full custody 3 weeks later. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. The court process was ugly, the way these things usually are. Derek petitioned for paternal rights once the official test confirmed what my own kit had already told me. His lawyer argued biology. My lawyer argued something simpler: presumed paternity, established bond, and 18 months of deliberate concealment on the part of both parents, which worked against their credibility more than either of them expected. There was one afternoon in the courthouse hallway I'll never forget. Derek's wife showed up, unannounced, sitting 3 rows behind us in the gallery with her arms crossed, her face like stone. She never said a word to me. She didn't have to. I recognized that look. I'd worn it myself, not long before. Rachel, to her credit, eventually did something I didn't expect. She testified that Emily and I had a bond that shouldn't be disrupted, that keeping her home stable with the one consistent parental relationship she'd known mattered more than correcting a biological technicality after the fact. It wasn't enough to save our marriage. But it was, I think, the one truly selfless thing she did in that entire ordeal. The judge ruled that Derek could pursue a relationship with Emily later, through proper legal channels, once she was older, if everyone agreed it was in her best interest, but that disrupting her primary bond at 6 months old, based purely on a DNA result, wasn't in the child's best interest right now. I kept primary custody. Rachel and I worked out a shared arrangement, civil, if not warm. Rachel and I divorced 8 months after that night in the kitchen. It wasn't dramatic by the end. Just quiet and sad, the way most real heartbreaks are, without the shouting matches you see in movies. We sold the house. She moved into an apartment 15 minutes away so she could still see Emily every week. The first time I dropped Emily off at Rachel's new apartment for a weekend visit, I sat in my car in the parking lot afterward for almost 20 minutes, just breathing. It wasn't sadness exactly. It was something closer to grief for the life I thought I was going to have, even while I was building an entirely new one in its place. I want to tell you that I forgave her completely, that I found some peaceful resolution where all the anger just faded away into wisdom. I haven't gotten there yet, honestly. Some days I still think about those 18 months, the ultrasounds, the nursery walls, the version of my life I thought I was living, and I feel that same cold drop in my stomach all over again. But I look at Emily now, she's almost 2, and none of that matters when she runs across the living room floor and throws her arms around my legs and says "Dada" like it's the easiest word in the world. Because it is. It always was. Some nights, after I put her to bed, I stand in the doorway of her room the same way I used to stand in that half-painted nursery, watching her sleep, and I think about how strange it is that the worst day of my life led me here, to this quiet, steady, unremarkable happiness. Just a man and his daughter, and a life that finally has no secrets left in it. DNA doesn't make a father. Presence does. Time does. Every 3 a.m. feeding, every fever, every single ordinary day you choose to show up, that's what makes a father, and no lab result can take that away from a man who's already given his whole heart to a child. If there's one thing I'd want anyone listening to this to understand, it's this. If your gut is telling you something is wrong, don't be afraid to find the truth, no matter how much it costs you in the short term. The truth is never as dangerous as the lie you've been living with. And love, real love, the kind that shows up at 3 in the morning without complaint, that's never determined by a test. It's determined by who stays.